October 13th, isn't it? Okay. And early practice based in.
You can read it. It's not that hard.
Amash Shaninu. How do you say that? Velona. There's a little pause, isn't there? There's a space.
No.
Hagias Tumra.
That's if he's a coin.
Could you translate from Hagias Man?
If the time comes that implying the wedding is supposed to schedule to be married, but only so, but he doesn't marry for Shalosh. He eats from him. He's got a feeder.
From the Truma.
Yes, Yochel literally means it's able, but in this particular context it means.
You would think he'd be.
You would think Hagiyazman, if the time came up on the first day of the week, that he would have give her the Yom Ravi.
Rabbi Yosef.
No, he said that statement in the name of Rabbi Yudomash, and he's catching himself. He was sick. Forgetting that was. He forgot it. So now he's catching himself. The Gemara is talking about a man that's catching himself.
Who was Shmuel's contemporary?
Shmuel was Rab's contemporary, the first generation of the Amoraim.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, Amoraim is...
Amoraim, the ones that contribute to the Mishnayos, the Gemara.
Hold on, where do Rishonim before?
Rishonim comes later.
Amoraim
to the Gemara.
Tanaim are Mishnah. Our Gemara. Rishonim
later. It comes after the Gonim.
And because they both start out.
Come on, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Omer Rab Yosef.
Let's start out. Read
it. Can't you read it? That's one question. Another question?
You
got to read it like a question. And then he answers. But the question is, the third question. Is hanging something that we learned that has a question, has an explanation in written, and something we learned that doesn't have explanation. That's wrong. It cannot be that. So now he's correcting himself. If we learn Hachit more, this is the way we learn. Yeah.
Repeat
because you don't read it over several times. And please, why do we say that a basula, a virgin, a lady, gets married on the 4th day of the week? If he has complaints against her virginity, or a mashkin bezin rises up early to go to the morning. The Gemara, so that's why he corrects it himself. So the Gemara asks questions. Shabbos. Shall they also be able to get married on the first day of the week as well as on the on the 4th day of the week? And the answer is that's as far as we got.
Okay, now please.
When we learn the shir, I want you to read the whole thing.
Gemara. You repeat the Gemara now, and word for word, line for line, translate, and I will repeat after you now. Please.
A virgin shows to get married on the 4th day
of the week.
And a widowable lady on the 5th day. Twice during the week, on the 2nd day and on the 5th day. If you had a complaint against virginity, Oya Mashkin Bezin. Correct, Mr. Katz. Black dog. Oh, okay. You left out the key phrase. So he's catching himself. Omar Rabbi Yosef. Something we learned and something we didn't learn. The Mishna we learned, and the Mimer from Rabbi Yudomash we didn't learn. The Mishna we learned and the Mimer from Rabbi Yudomash we didn't learn. The Mishna we learned and the Bible. Are you trying to hang something that we learned, a reason, explained it as something that we didn't explain the reason? That can't be. But if we learn, this is the way we learn. All right. And then we say no Shabbos. Let her also get married on the first day of the week besides the 4th day. Shabbos. She's very simple. Even I know it.
Rasul says the Yom Haravi, Amar Yosef, Amar Shmuel, Mipnei Ma'amur, Rasul says the Yom Haravi, Nisas, Mipnei Ma'amur, Rasul Nisas the Yom Haravi, the Fisher Shmir, Hagiyaz Ma, below the Sar, Orchlas Bishlo, Orchlas, Yechol Hagiyaz Shabbos, Yehem Mara, La Mazonos. Why am I doing that? The Yom, there's no vowels. That's the Yom Harvi, Amar Rav Yosef, Mara Davraham. Tanya, something we learned, something we didn't learn. Hey Tanya, hey Lo Tanya, this we learned, this we didn't learn. Hey Tanya, this we learned, this we learned. Tanya,
third question.
To Meforish. Tama.
Tanya, Meforish, Tama?
But the Sanya, but the Tanya, the low first Tama?
Why do you stumble over
I don't know what's wrong. I'm devolving. I can't think.
why do I do it?
Beats me.
Went over the same word with you, didn't I? Of course, I got a couple hundred times that should not make much of a difference. The answer is yes.
See, I don't know. See, when I problem is when I start doing something, I get, I don't know, it's when I start making an error and they start feeding on themselves.
You don't have to feed on yourself, and you don't have to be sorry for yourself. Just keep on learning. Don't get uptight. Just go over it several times by yourself.
You're able to read it.
What's the kudus? What's the short? No, I mean, what's the word? The word. Nekut? Dictut? Is it dictut?
The vowel. All these dots.
Something used in dictut? It's dak. What's the word dak? Dalet. It's specific. Dak must be the
How to pronounce the word.
Chamishi. Try again. The Sierra, the Yaris, the Yom. I'm a Rabbi Yosef, I'm a Rabbi Huda, I'm a Shmuel. Yipnema, Rup, Basula, Nisas, the Yom, Rabbi, Lefi, Shanir, Chagias, Man, Velo, Nasara, Bashavas, Vahe, Nisas, the Yom, Rabbi, Lo Tanya, Elatali, Tanya, Dimafarish, Tama, Bitisina, Biditanya. Biditanya, the Lo Farish, Shema, Amur, Basula, Tanas, Basulim, Hayat, Mashkin, Levestin, Shakdas, Shahid. Yes, sir.
In the Gemara Shabbos, we read it every Friday night. We read all the Mishnayos of the second chapter of Gemara Shabbos. One of the Mishnayos that we read, Gemara Shabbos, is this Mishnah. It says like this: Al Sholosh, on 3 sins. Noshim Mesos. Ladies die Rishas Leidoso at the time they give birth to children. Al She'enon Mizihirus Benido. One of the sins that they may have committed is that they have not been careful in their menstrual periods. You see, the Jewish law, the Torah law requires that be careful that when she is a nido, a menstruate, she is not supposed to live sexually with her husband. The Gemara gives guidelines as to when you're supposed to separate from your wife. It's spelled out in the Kitchen or in the English. Suffice to say, it's usually the lady has.
This is
123. This is an Ari Shabbos. When you say just in Kabbalah Shabbos, so there is a Mishnah in there, and this is a whole set of Mishnayos, all the way to the whole second chapter of the Mishnahs in the second parak in Shabbos. This is one of those. So ladies die, Rishas Leidos, in the time they give birth. Because they're not careful in the laws of Nido. And Nido, as gentlemen you no doubt are aware of, a lady that has a menstrual period is not supposed to live sexually with her husband. And when it stops, after at least 5 from the start of the period, and as long as it lasts, she's supposed to cleanse herself and then wear a special type of clothing for the next 7 days, where she examines herself in the early morning and late afternoon in the natural sunlight and the privacy to see if she's still bleeding. If she's not, for 7 days. At the end of the 7th day, she has to wash herself and cleanse a pair of nails and comb her hair and everything else necessary, remove her cosmetics and everything, and go to a ritual bath called a mikveh, a kosher mikveh. And when she immerses herself under the supervision of a kosher Jewish lady, she becomes pure, and she can have live with her husband sexually for the next 2 weeks or so until the next. And this is considered called taharas, purity of family relationships. It's one of the greatest mitzvahs that the Jew can have. There was a book written many years ago by Rabbi Miller, who was a Talmud of Baruch HaShulchan, who called this book The Secret of the Jew, where he told about the fact that...
The same relation to Avigdor Miller?
I have no idea.
Could have been his father.
Everything is possible. I remember before he died, while I was still in the yeshiva, he paid a visit to the yeshiva. So he lived to the 1940s, because I was in the yeshiva from 1941 on. All right, that's one avera. If a lady doesn't separate challah when she makes dough, you're supposed to separate challah. If you have enough of the dough, you separate it, and you're supposed to. In the ancient times, you used to give it to the coin. Nowadays, we burn a portion of it. There has to be a certain amount. That's the amount of the volume of, I think it's 43 1/5 of eggs, a volume. And about local anir. And lighting the candle on Erev Shabbos,
you light candles. Usually 20 minutes before sunset. So that's the way it is. Like for instance, today the sun sets at 6:13. Tomorrow probably 6:11. So candle lighting will be about 5:51, and that's when we light candles. Now these three, if they're not careful with any of these three things, and they commit a sin, and they'll do one of these things, they suffer a possible death when they giving birth. Now the Midrash is going to discuss why this is
Different clothing nowadays?
yes. We have a lot of halachas. Thanks God nowadays we have Rabbi Eider written in English. He's got all the guidelines what you're supposed to do to keep Taras Mishpacha beautiful. Beautiful, and it has the Haskama from and he's a brother on his own, and it's just beautiful. Nowadays you can become a very you can become a very good Jew, gentlemen. All you have to do is to become attentive to the responsibilities. All right, now the Midrash Tanchuma is one of the Sefer of the Midrash, and Parshas Noach starts, Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, teach us our teacher. On how many sins do ladies die at the time of their giving birth? So learn our sages. Our shlosha on three things. I've just quoted them to you, gentlemen, and it's not even repeated here. Here it is. And Lochas Anir, lighting the candles. You read it every Shabbos. You see, the trouble is you're dominant and you read it, but you don't really connect it to the real world. But it really has to be connected to the real world. All right. Nida, see with the posik. A lady gives a discharge. Chala teichem, the fruits of your dough. Adlokas anir, lighting the candles. Yeshaya nunches, harasa Shabbos onig. You should call to Shabbos a pleasure. Shabbos should be a Shabbos. This is lighting the candle. It makes it look nice. Candle lighting, it makes Shabbos look more pleasure to it. It's something extraordinary. If you'll say, I can sit in the darkness, that's not pleasure. Sitting in darkness, here's the news, gentlemen. Those who go to hell, their punishment, among other things, is that they sit in eternal darkness.
Eternal, or as long as the sentences?
Darkness.
And Shabbos they have light though, because the flames stop.
Well, that's...
The house and out of it. I guess they're not the same thing. Infrared flames.
No, you have a concept.
You just pure infrared, you wouldn't see it.
Or whatever it is. At any rate, this is what the Midrash is saying here. I want you to know there are many Midrashim, and sometimes Midrashim contradict one another, but it doesn't mean that one is wrong and one is right. They're both right. It depends on the circumstances of certain kids. Sometimes they come on head on, and there's no way that both can be right. And I remember once when I was just puzzled because one was saying something directly opposite the other was saying, and they both couldn't possibly be right. So I went to my Rabbi Chaim Dovich was a Kohen Olam, Baruch Hashem. He was the head of the rabbinical court of all America, and the head of the rabbinical court in Chicago, of all America. He was the Rosh Yeshiva and the Manhil Yeshiva for many years. They spent his Torah in Chicago, and I had the schus to be his Talmud for many years. And after he retired, went to Eretz Yisrael, he became an advisor to the chief rabbis of your father, Rosh did. So he's great to go and have this Baruch Hashem, this tremendous thing. So I pointed out to him, I said, how do you explain this? He says, there's many midrashim. And then he wasn't perturbed by the fact that there seems to be contradictions. And then I ran across a Kesuvos in Warrior Vomus, and it said the same lashon. There are many midrashim. Two quoting things. There was so there's two opinions. One opinion was that one that Rashi usually quotes, she was 3 years old at the time he married her. And they're two separate midrashim. There are many midrashim. It doesn't get excited. All right, let's go. All right, let's go back here. They sit in darkness.
What's the abbreviation?
If you will say. Yosef in darkness, you sit in darkness. This is not a pleasure, because those who go down to hell are judged by darkness. Earth, there.
Tomorrow. Awful is the name of the country?
Awful is the darkness. Yeah, there are different roots for it.
Could you say again? Aphis?
Awful. It's a dark place. It should be that too. There are more than one type of darkness. You remember when they...
What can you deduce from the way this is lettered? Or can you
the Midrash is saying this is a proof, one of the proofs, that it's darkness at the time of the Chodos. We had different kinds. You remember in the 3 nights of darkness, There was a darkness that is just ordinary darkness, and there's a darkness that gets more thick darkness, and then there's a darkness you can't even move in it. There's different types of darkness. And in the 7th chapter in Mishlei, it talks about darkness, different types of darkness, and it's quoted in the beginning of the War Psukim a little bit too. All right, talking about different types of darkness. But anyway, let's get back to here. What was the reason? Now we're trying to find the reason why women, Jewish ladies, are commanded on these 3 mitzvahs. Why ladies? Why not men as well? Odma Rishon the first man was the beginning of my creation of man. And he was commanded on the tree of knowledge that you're not supposed to eat from. And it's written by Chava, his wife, Eve. Isha, the woman, saw the Nochash, the serpent, told her that you could eat from it, and she violated it, and she ate from it. She gave to her husband to eat. But Titain Gam, the Isha, she also gave to her husband. He over here by Yochel, and he ate. And because they both ate, Lagorim Lo Misa, it made him subject to mortality. He became mortal. He could no longer live forever like it was the plan originally. See, the plan was by God that, and not only man would live, but man messed up. Again, at Mount Torah, God, again, we could live forever. And again, we messed up. And a third time will come. Hopefully, this time we won't mess up. How many times I mess up? And in effect, she shed his blood. She made him to die. It's like murdering. If you are responsible, if one is responsible for causing somebody to die, how do we offset it? This reminds me of was a Rishon, one of the great Gedolim of the earlier generation who lived in the 1200s. He was one of the great Talmudic scholars that we depend upon. We quote him and we use him as a posek, a great authority for our Shulchan Aruch. And he wrote this beautiful sefer, Shar Tshuva, The Gates of Repentance, which is now translated in English. You can get it beautiful. And the English translation is fine, but the Hebrew in the English translation is even better. His learning is astronomical. You just have to be awed. Everything he says has Torah Death. He speaks like a man that knows the entire Talmud beautifully. All the Gedolim and the Rishon. And it is one of the sins that is never forgiven until a person dies. He postulates it's possible to be forgiven from a Chil Hashem if he makes a corresponding Kiddush Hashem of a big enough magnitude offsets the Chil Hashem. So here I said, this Midrash is following that type of reasoning. So Chava, who represented the ladies, well, not necessarily, she caused mankind to become mortal. She was convinced by the Nosh, by the serpent. In this week's Sedra, Shofech Dam, Ba'odam Damo Yishofech. If a person sheds the blood of a man, by man his blood shall be shed. In other words, Mida connected Mida. Like a person does, that's what he's supposed to be. Well, there's plenty of places. That's not only one place here. So, Shofech now. Alright, so what is this is like an Eitzit Keva. Good advice. How to do tshuva when her blood is pouring, in this case the blood of Nidah, not necessarily dying, and she watches her periods so that she does it according to halacha Nidah and should be. Today she Adam she shavcha. In order there should be a kapot, a forgiveness for her for the blood that she has blood. So it's the beauty of the Rabbi Torah is that gives it many opportunities to repent. God is never to be interpreted as being vindictive and wanting to punish anybody, even if we make grievous mistakes. As long as we do tshuva, He is prepared to forgive us. And this is a method, okay, that's a very beautiful. Now the next one. It's possible. There are many Mamorim involved in the Maaseh Bereshis, and frankly, Chazal warn us against going too deep into the intrinsic nature of God. These are areas that really we cannot really, with a prophet, go into more than what has been discussed by the nature of God. How can we possibly know what God will, in any way? God has no body, and God exists forever.
I don't disagree.
But that's a good point. All this Rabbi knows that when a person is first born, he's created with the Yetzer Hara. And he doesn't get a Yetzer Tov until he gets to be Bar Mitzvah, 13 years old. So Yetzer Hara has 13 years to get a head start on him. Of course, in the case of Adam Rishon, he was created a full-grown man of about 20. It's like that. It wasn't starting as a little baby. But, of course, unfortunately, he didn't have any human parents to give him guidelines. But I would say a man that lives 930 years and makes one mistake, I think that's pretty good. I would suggest that at this point, although he had the potential to have them, they were not operative. Because
he didn't have it either?
No, it was not operative. Once they get this thing, that makes it, there was this link, that make it operative. Otherwise, they wouldn't have an inclination to become aware of, although we have a Midrash that says that the Chava gave to all the animals to eat as well. She was determined that he's going to, everybody's going to. The only one that didn't get it to eat from is the phoenix bird. So we have that legend about the phoenix. It's in the Midrash.
What's the phoenix called in Hebrew?
I don't know, but there is a Midrash there in Bereshit Rabbah. It talks about a certain bird. I can find it for you, but it'll take a little time. Bereshit is just tremendous. It takes almost an inch of paper just to go. You could spend a whole year just studying the Midrash on just that one sentence. So I'm not trying to do that.
Someday.
Yeah, we'll get around to it. All right, now the mitzvah of Challah. Did I answer your question? Okay. Mitzvah of Challah, second line on page Yud Beis. Now, how do we know that she has to, a Jewish lady has to also separate Challah? Well, as a matter of fact, a Jewish man bakes bread, he would also have the responsibility. But primarily, a Jewish lady is the first one to do it. But if and Shabbos is coming and the wife is not home, so you light the candles. Once in a while it happens. Mitzvah Challah, Minayin, how do we know she that? She sort of made unclean the dough of the world, if you want to say so, by bringing into.
You mean the idea of making a living for the world? Yet
Not making a living, introducing the
bread. That's what it means, doesn't it?
Whatever it is, it doesn't explain it. It just says the words. You understand? There's no explanation to what exactly it means. Onaf Yosef says like this: even though a man is commanded in the mitzvahs of Challah and there's the most important mitzvah hangs about the woman, and we learn it out from there, which is not necessarily by man. The Yochel Torah was a great gadol on Eichel, 1867, 150 years ago, a tremendous gadol. And this is she made unclean the dough of the world, all right, and Omar Rabbi Yosef Duskla, Rabbi Yosef says, others said that's a different version, Kishem Isos of the mind, just like a lady, she kneads the dough, her dough in water, in order to knead it, puts the flour and mixes it up with water. So then she takes off the part of the dough that needs to be challah. So God made the same way when He created Adam Rishon, the first man. See, a dew went up from the earth, or some kind of a drizzle, and it watered the earth. So Adam offered God formed man from the dust that was watered in there. All right, how do we know that the lighting of candles is also necessary, and primarily on ladies? He she sort of extinguished the light of man. See, nearly the candle of God is the soul of man, therefore she watched and the lighting of the candles. All right, this is that Mamaima. It's possible. This is the Midrash Tanchuma. Truth is, we have Baruch Hashem, and this is just one way of explaining it. Why?
Just like a portion of Adam was taken to create you.
Yeah. So this is a method of making good kapora for those sins. All right. Now the next one.
this week's Seder says, Ela told us, these are generations of Noah, and then repeats the word Noah again. So why is that necessary to repeat it twice? Second page. These are generations of Noah. Opened up. Omar says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, 11th chapter, Pri Tzadik Eitz Chaim. The fruits of a righteous person is a tree of life, and one that takes souls is wise. Omar Rabbi Yehuda. This is talking about at the time a person goes up from the world, that means he dies, and he goes up to heaven before God. And unfortunately this person dies without any children. Who makes our bocha? He is pained and he's crying. He comes and cries before God. He lived his life, and he didn't happen to have any children. So it says to him, the Holy One, blessed be He, why are you crying? And today's show, are you crying perhaps because you didn't stand up fruits in the world? Maybe that's the reason you're not born. The truth is, you have fruits even better than having children. So this person that dies says to God, Rabbi, Master of the world, he's a modesty. What is the fruits that I've stood up with, that I've made, that I've done? I mean, if I haven't had any children, what is my merits? Says to the Holy One, one of the merits is the Torah. The fruits of a tzaddik. The Torah is called the tree of life to those that cling to it. That's one thing. Omar doesn't say the fruits of a tzaddik are it says the fruits of a tzaddik, and then it says Eitz Chaim. And also, what are the real true generations, the offspring of man? This is his good deeds are the true offspring of man. Therefore, it says, Elo told us Noah. These are generations of Noah, the true offspring of Noah. It was Noah himself. He made himself a tzaddik. He made himself, through his good deeds, a righteous person. That is a tremendous thing. Of course, he also had children. But this was also an intrinsic part of his righteousness. In Homer, that's what it says. Elo told us Noah. No, this is the generation of Noah, tzaddik, that was complete. Homer Abu also does for the later generations with the merits of the Yaakov, because of our forefathers. Right? How do we know that the earlier generations don't have schusim from the later generations? Because it says Noah found favor in the eyes of God. But schus, and what merit? The schus told also the merits of his descendants. So this Midrash wants to say that we don't have schusim from the previous generation, but that of course is contradicted by another Midrash, and it says Abraham Avinu was saved by the schus of Yaakov, who would come 2 generations after him. So it's not necessarily to be taken as necessarily. It just brings a proof here, but it's not necessarily a proof positive. Shneimar Ela told us Noah. And you take souls is a wise person. That's a person that feeds a poor person. That is a wise person. Noach did not die until he saw the world repopulated. I'm almost Yotzi Yotzal, until he saw 70 nations going out from his loins. He only mentioned his righteousness. In other words, all that came after him doesn't amount as much as his own personal righteousness. And a person that takes souls is a wise person. He fed all the animals in the ark, which was a tremendous job. What did he feed them? The Torah said, figs everybody ate, all before you and for them, for food. But our sages say, no, he fed them each food with each one might. He fed them each type of thing what they were accustomed to eat. Gomo Tevin, to the camel he fed straw, Kamor Shlorim, and to the donkey barley, whatever the animals were. Also all of them, what they were accustomed to eating. A person that saves souls is a wise person. And there are different types of feeding times. One animal eats at a certain hour in the day, the other is eaten the second hour of the day, Yesh B'Shlosh, and the third hour, Yesh B'Amtzol, and then some in the middle of the night, and the crowing of the rooster. So they spent sleepless nights for a whole year. Thing, and Chazal tell us that he came late once with the lion. The lion gave him a blow, messed him up a little bit. And when later on, when they offered kabbonos, Shem had to offer the kabbonos because his father was a little messed up.
Was this qualified for service then?
Rabbi Sena says, Yud Beis Chodesh B'Teva, they were 12 months in the ark, a full solar year, asleep in day or Osik. He was constantly feeding all the animals. Person that takes souls is a wise person. Right?
He had his family to help him, but he was with the ships. There
was a lot of animals to feed. All right, now this Midrash is the one that I really wanted to learn, and I'd like to learn as much as I can of it before we learn. Yes.
It mentions
he had 3 sons.
Then later on, after the model, it was 600 years.
His 600 years.
He was 600 years old
when the marble started.
So there was 100 years lapse from the time that he had his 3 sons.
Not correct. Really not correct. From the time he had his first of 3 sons, Yephes was 100 years old at the time of the flood. And Hashem,
the first son?
No, from his birth. He was 500 years old. And then he started having children.
Okay. And then, the end of the flood, he was 600 years old. So it's only 100 years old.
The flood didn't come until the 600th year of Noah. And the flood ended in the 601st year of Noah.
The flood came
in the 600th year of Noah.
Where does the 120 years come in?
It started 20 years before, when he was born and 80 years old, that started at 120. At that point, God told him to start building it. And he started building at that point. I mention it because most of the generations prior to that time had children before that time in their life. Even though they lived a long time, they had started having children even at an earlier age. The reason God made it that he didn't have children there, because in case the children would turn out to be righteous, he would be having a lot of responsibility of building more than one ark, have all these population. So God just pulled them off.
Remember, if
they would be destroyed, and he would have a lot of pain because of that. So rather than having pain and having this type of situation, that's correct. Yeah. Well, he lived to be 950 years old.
Was he bigger physically than we are nowadays? Because was the Amma bigger?
I have no idea.
He might have been bigger because the Amma would be.
He may have very well been, but there again, I have no. I can't tell you what I don't know.
How come all of that was people and animals, everything was destroyed? Not one out before the marble.
Very simple. In addition to a flood, there was tremendous heat generated, except near the area of the flood, of the ark. And so it destroyed the heat, the intensive pressure of the heat and the waters changed and destroyed everything. Yes. God knows how to do these things. Now this Midrash is a very beautiful Midrash, and we'll read as much as we can before we always share. Noah. These are generations of Noah. It should be blessed the name of the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, selected Jewish people over all the other 70 nations of the world. As it is written, the portion of the Lord is His people. And who is His people? Yaakov is the portion of His people, of His inheritance. God has a special nation in the world, and that's the Jewish people. That's who we call the chosen people, to be an example and live according to God's laws. God gave us the Torah that was written. It's called Torah Sheb'Ksav, the written Torah, but Remez, in hinting form. It's a phonos that was hidden and covered
If you read any pasuk in Tanakh, you won't know what it means. No way will you know what it means unless you can go to the Gemara and the Midrash and all the Talmud. That is called the Mishna, the Gemara, and the Torah Shabbat Peh, the Torah by word of mouth. This explains the Torah Shabbat Peh and the oral law. Rotos is the specifics of the written law. So without the specifics, you wouldn't know what it means. Rabbi Yonah says in the beginning of his commentary on Pirkei Avos that unless we learn the oral law, we wouldn't know the specifics of any of the mitzvahs. Impossible to do any one of the mitzvahs in Torah. That's why it's so necessary to become learning Gemara. That's why we're going to learn Gemara, because it's necessary to know what it means. Oh, for God's sake, why'd you just say so? We have a big conversation. All right, let's go further. And the last line, the Torah Shabbat Peh and the oral Torah, Brotos, is the specifics. The Torah is very much. You look in relation to that, what? A little. What? Mat? Al Shabbat Peh, in relation to the Al-Peh, the next page 12, in Job. The book of Job was written by Moshe, of course, Moshe Bein. And it says like this, Aruch Meretz Midah is wider than the earth in measurement. Rochava Minei Yam. And it's longer than the earth in measurement, and it's wider than the ocean, from the measurements of the ocean. Where'd you think I made it up? You found out my secret. When it's written, Lo Simotza Be'eretz HaChaim, you won't find it in the land of life, of the living. Shat Toptes. So the Midrash is asking the question, what does it mean you won't find it in the land of the living? Will you find it in the land of the dead? You will not find the knowledge of the oral Torah by a person